The neutral station hung in space between territories, a massive structure built by ancient civilizations for exactly this purpose: peace negotiations, diplomatic meetings, and sometimes trial by combat. Today, representatives from 40 species gathered to watch history being made. The observation galleries were filled to capacity. Billions more watched through broadcasts across the galaxy. In the preparation room, Commodore Deho checked his equipment one final time. He wore light armor, traditional for Velthric challenges. He carried no weapons except a long blade. Across the station, in another preparation room, the Velthric champion was doing the same. Wing Leader Thrax entered the room. "It is time, Human Deho. Are you prepared?" "As prepared as I'll ever be." Deho stood and rolled his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles. 3 weeks of training with the Draxan had made him stronger and faster, but he harbored no illusions. His opponent was genetically engineered for combat, had trained since childhood, had never lost a fight. "Remember what I taught you," Thrax said. "Do not try to match his strength. Use his momentum against him, and most importantly, do not stay down. A warrior who refuses to fall cannot be defeated." Deho smiled. "Sounds like something a human would say." Perhaps humans and Draxan are not so different after all. They walked together to the combat arena. It was a circular platform 50 meters across, surrounded by energy barriers. The galleries above were packed with spectators. Deho could see President Nari in the diplomatic box. Admiral Hyon sat beside her, and there in the front row of the public gallery were the survivors of the Defiant Dawn: Lieutenant Hana, Sergeant Taeyang, Dr. Minji, Engineer Jiwon. They had all come to watch. On the opposite side of the arena, the Velthric champion emerged. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, his body covered in bioengineered armor plating that looked like scales but was harder than steel. His muscles rippled as he moved. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light. This was not just a warrior. This was a weapon designed by the Velthric to be unbeatable. The Arbiter, a neutral species called the Vorlathi, stepped onto the platform. "This challenge is sanctioned by ancient law. Single combat to determine the outcome of the conflict between the human coalition and the Velthric Empire. The rules are simple. Fight until one combatant yields or cannot continue. There are no other restrictions. Combatants, are you ready?" Deho drew his blade. "Ready." The Velthric champion said nothing, merely raised his weapon, a massive sword that crackled with energy. "Begin." The champion moved with terrifying speed for something so large. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and swung his sword in a devastating arc. Deho barely managed to dodge, feeling the heat from the energy blade pass centimeters from his face. He rolled away and came up in a defensive stance. The champion pressed the attack, sword strikes coming faster than seemed possible. Deho blocked and parried desperately. Each impact sent shocks through his arms. His blade was already showing stress fractures from blocking the energy weapon. He couldn't win a straight fight. He had to be smarter. As the champion swung again, Deho didn't block. He dodged to the side and struck at the champion's knee. His blade bit into the joint, finding the gap between armor plates. The champion roared and backhanded Deho across the arena. Deho hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. In the gallery, Hana gasped. "Get up! Come on, Captain, get up!" Deho pushed himself to his hands and knees, coughing. Everything hurt. He probably had broken ribs, but Thrax's words echoed in his mind. "A warrior who refuses to fall cannot be defeated." He stood raising his blade again. The champion limped slightly, favoring his injured knee. Good. Deho had hurt him. Not much, but it was something. The champion charged again and the fight continued. For 10 minutes, Deho fought with everything he had learned. He used the champion's size against him, dodged instead of blocking, struck at joints and weak points. But it wasn't enough. The champion was too strong, too fast, too skilled. Deho's blade shattered. An energy strike caught his shoulder, burning through his armor. Another blow sent him sprawling. Deho tried to stand. His legs wouldn't support him. Blood ran down his face. His vision blurred. The champion approached slowly, victory certain. He raised his sword for the final strike. "Do you yield, human?" Deho thought about yielding, about ending this pain, about living to see another day. Then he thought about the Defiant Dawn, about the crew who chose to stay and fight when they could have run, about Hyun and the thousands of others who died at Terran Gate, about what it meant to be human, No, he said, and forced himself to his feet. He had no weapon. His armor was destroyed. He could barely stand, but he was standing. The champion hesitated. In his entire life, he had never seen someone this badly beaten refuse to yield. It didn't make sense. The human had lost. Why wouldn't he accept it? Deho staggered forward, raising his fists. He would fight barehanded if he had to. He would fight until he couldn't move. Because that's what humans did. They didn't give up. Ever. Why? The champion asked. Why do you continue? You cannot win. Because people are depending on me, Deho said through broken teeth. Because my crew refused to retreat at Terran Gate. Because 15,000 people died buying time for others to live. Because I'm human and humans don't quit. We don't abandon each other. We don't surrender. Not ever. The champion lowered his sword slightly, confusion in his glowing eyes. He had been created for combat. Trained in strategy and tactics. But he had never been taught about this. About honor, about loyalty, about fighting for something beyond yourself. In that moment of hesitation, Deho moved, not attacking the champion, but moving forward. One step, then another, walking toward certain death, but walking nonetheless, refusing to fall. Refusing to quit. The champion raised his sword. This human was foolish, stubborn, irrational, but there was something in his eyes, something the champion recognized despite never having felt it himself. It was the look of a warrior who had already decided he would die before yielding. The sword hesitated. Then slowly, incredibly, the champion lowered it. I yield. The arena fell silent. In the galleries, people stared in disbelief. The arbiter looked confused. Champion, you are winning. Why do you yield? The champion looked at Deho, this small, broken human who refused to fall. Because I was created to be unbeatable in combat. But this human has shown me something my creators never taught me. There is a kind of strength that has nothing to do with power or skill. He cannot defeat me. But I also cannot defeat him. Because he will not stop. Will not yield. Will keep fighting until his body fails completely. That is not something I can overcome. And it is not something I wish to destroy. He turned to face the galleries. The human wins. The crowd erupted. Some cheering, others shouting in confusion. In the diplomatic box, President Nari sat stunned. They had won. Impossibly, incredibly, they had won. Medical teams rushed onto the platform to help Deho. He tried to wave them off, but his legs finally gave out. As they lowered him onto a stretcher, he looked up at the gallery where his crew was watching. Hana was crying. Taiyang was cheering. Jiwon was laughing. They had won. The peace treaty was signed 3 days later. The Velthric Empire withdrew from all contested systems and recognized the coalition as an equal power. Other species, seeing that the empire could be challenged successfully, began requesting membership in the coalition. Within months, it grew to include 20 different civilizations. 6 months after the challenge, the rebuilt Defiant Dawn was ready to launch. Captain Deho, finally recovered from his injuries, stood in the shipyard with his original crew. The ship looked beautiful, sleek and powerful with new weapon systems and coalition technology, but it was still recognizably the Defiant Dawn, still the ship that had refused to retreat. Ready for another adventure, Captain? Hana asked. Deho smiled. Always. But let's try to avoid getting blown apart this time. Where's the fun in that? Jiwon said, and everyone laughed. As the crew boarded their ship, Deho paused at the airlock. He looked back at Earth, at the fleet of coalition vessels in orbit, at the galaxy beyond. So much had changed since that day at Terran Gate. Humanity had gone from prey to equal, from isolated to alliance leaders, all because they had refused to retreat. Captain? Taiyang asked. Is something wrong? No, Deho said. I was just thinking about what I told the Council. That humans don't fight for conquest or glory. We fight because we refuse to abandon those who depend on us. That refusal, that choice we made at Terran Gate changed everything. Do you regret it? Knowing the cost? Deho thought about the 15,000 names on the memorial. About the pain and sacrifice. About the fear and the blood. Then he thought about the 2 million civilians who escaped. About the 7 species who joined humanity because they saw something worth protecting. About the galaxy that was better because humans had refused to run. No regrets, he said finally. That day at Terran Gate wasn't the start of humanity's war. It was the start of humanity's place in the galaxy. We showed everyone who we are. Not the strongest or the smartest, but a species that stands together, that protects each other, that never gives up. That's worth fighting for. Admiral Hyon stood in the command center of the Coalition flagship Unity, studying the strategic maps. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Terran Gate. 6 months that had changed the entire galaxy. What started as a desperate last stand had become a turning point in the war. The map showed the new reality. Human-controlled space had expanded, not through conquest but through alliance. The Korath Confederacy, the Miralan Collective, the Draxan Empire, the Lumari, and 3 other species had joined the coalition. Together they controlled a quarter of the contested territory. More species joined every week. Admiral, the forward scouts report Velthric fleet movements near the Kester system. Captain Suhi said. She had commanded the Iron Wind before it was destroyed at Terran Gate. Now she served on Hyon's staff, having been promoted for her actions that day. Hyon nodded. They're testing our response times, trying to find weaknesses in our defensive network. Have Wing Leader Thrax take his squadron to investigate. The Draxan pilots are itching for action. Wing Leader Thrax was a Draxan, a species that valued martial prowess above all else. They were large, powerful beings covered in thick scales. Their warships were built for close combat. Their warriors trained from childhood. Before the Battle of Terran Gate, the Draxan had viewed humans as weak. Now they considered them battle brothers. Thrax had personally requested to serve alongside humans. Only those who refuse death earn the right to stand among warriors, he had said. The humans of the Defiant Dawn earned this right with blood. I would learn from them. In the medical station orbiting Earth, Captain Deho was finally cleared to leave. He had spent 2 months in the hospital recovering from his injuries. Burns, broken ribs, radiation exposure. The doctors had worked miracles keeping him alive. Now he was being promoted to Commodore and given command of a new ship. But first he had to visit the memorial. The Terran Gate Memorial stood in the center of the station. 15,000 names carved into black stone. Every person who died defending the gate. Crew members from the 23 ships that made the stand. Deho found the section for the Defiant Dawn. He read the names slowly. People he had known. Friends. Comrades who had chosen to stay and fight. They saved a lot of lives, a voice said behind him. Deho turned. Private Taiyang stood there, now wearing sergeant stripes. The young man looked different, older, harder. The battle had changed him. Changed all of them. Sergeant Taiyang, I heard about your promotion. Well deserved. Thank you, sir. I heard you're getting a new command. The Coalition flagship, Deho nodded. The Defiant Dawn is being rebuilt, but she won't be ready for months. In the meantime, I'm taking command of Unity. Admiral Hyon wants someone who understands Coalition tactics. They stood together in silence, looking at the names on the wall. Finally, Taiyang spoke. Do you think it was worth it, sir? All those deaths? Deho considered the question carefully. 15,000 people died at Terran Gate, but 2 million civilians escaped. And our actions inspired 7 species to join us. Without those allies, Earth itself might have fallen by now. So yes, it was worth it. But that doesn't make it hurt less. Engineer Jiwan walked through the shipyards, inspecting the reconstruction of the Defiant Dawn. The ship had been a wreck when they towed it back. Multiple hull breaches, reactor damage, most systems completely destroyed. The engineer said it would be easier to build a new ship. But Jiwan had refused. This ship had history, had meaning. It deserved to fly again. How's she looking? Daiho asked, approaching from behind. Jiwan smiled. Like new, sir. Better than new, actually. We've upgraded the weapon systems, reinforced the armor, and installed Coalition shield technology. When she launches next month, the Defiant Dawn will be the most advanced destroyer in the fleet. Good. She earned it. Deho placed his hand on the hull. He could feel the vibrations of the construction work inside. This ship had saved his life. Had saved all of them. It felt right that she would fly again. On the other side of the galaxy, Empress Voth sat in her throne room, watching reports from the front lines. The war was not going well. The humans and their coalition were pushing back Velthric forces on multiple fronts. Her generals made excuses, claimed the humans had superior numbers or technology. But Voth knew the truth. The humans were winning because they fought differently, because they inspired loyalty in a way the Velthric never could. The Empire had always maintained control through fear and intimidation. Conquered species obeyed because they had no choice. But they didn't fight with passion, didn't sacrifice themselves willingly. The moment they saw weakness, they would rebel. But the human coalition was different. The species that joined them did so voluntarily, fought willingly, coordinated perfectly because they trusted each other. That trust was a weapon the Velthric couldn't counter. Voth made a decision. Summon my advisors. I want to discuss peace negotiations. Her military commander was shocked. Your Majesty, the Empire has never negotiated with prey species. The humans are not prey, Voth said coldly. They are warriors who have earned respect through blood, and they are winning. We can continue fighting and watch our empire crumble, or we can negotiate now from a position of relative strength. Which would you prefer? 3 weeks later, the peace proposal arrived at coalition headquarters. The Velthric Empire offered to negotiate an end to the war. President Nari of Earth called an emergency council meeting. Admiral Hyan argued for continuing the war, while the coalition was strong. Other representatives wanted peace immediately, tired of the casualties. Commodore Deho was asked to testify about the Terran Gate battle. He stood before the council, still wearing bandages under his uniform. You're asking me if we should accept peace. I can't answer that. I'm a soldier, not a politician. But I can tell you what I learned at Terran Gate. I learned that humans don't fight for conquest or glory. We fight because we refuse to abandon those who depend on us. That's what makes us different from the Velthric. That's why other species chose to stand with us. Ambassador Suhyun listened carefully. An idea formed in her mind. After the session, she approached President Nari. I have a proposal. We accept negotiations, but on our terms. The Velthric must withdraw from 20 contested systems and acknowledge the coalition as an equal power. It's a bold demand. They probably won't accept, but it shows we're willing to talk without showing weakness. Nari considered it. And if they reject it, then we continue the war knowing we tried for peace. But I don't think they'll reject it. The Empress wouldn't have offered negotiations if she wasn't desperate. The proposal was sent. To everyone's surprise, Empress Voth agreed to most terms. But she added one condition: a traditional Velthric challenge, single combat between champions. If the human champion won, the Empire would withdraw completely from the contested systems. If the Velthric champion won, humanity would surrender 3 core systems. It's a trap, Admiral Hyan said. Their champion will be genetically enhanced, trained from birth. No human can match that. Then we don't have a champion? President Nari asked. We do, a voice said from the doorway. Commodore Deho stepped into the room. I'll fight. I refuse to retreat at Terran Gate. I won't retreat from this either. Wing Leader Thrax contacted Deho privately that night. Human Deho, I watched the recording of your council meeting. You know you cannot defeat the Empress's champion in fair combat. I know. Then why accept? Deho smiled. Because someone has to. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I've learned something about humans. We don't win because we're stronger or faster. We win because we refuse to quit. Maybe that will be enough. Thrax was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a deep rumbling sound. You humans are either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most foolish. Perhaps both, very well. I will train you. If you must face this challenge, you will face it with every advantage I can give you. For 3 weeks, Deho trained with Thrax and the Draxan warriors. They taught him their fighting techniques, showed him how to use an opponent's strength against them, how to endure pain and keep fighting. It was brutal, exhausting, but Deho learned, and as the day of the challenge approached, he felt ready. Not ready to win, but ready to give everything he had. Ambassador Suhyun stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Assembly Station, watching the battle feed from Terran system. Around her, representatives from 30 different species watched the same feed. Most of them were silent. Some whispered to each other. All of them seemed unable to look away. On the massive display screen, the Defiant Dawn fired its last functioning weapons at a Velthric cruiser. The human ship was a wreck. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches. Its hull glowed red-hot in places where armor had melted. But it was still fighting, still refusing to retreat. Madness, muttered the Karathi ambassador. They should have surrendered hours ago. This is pointless death. Suhyun turned to face him. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. That's where you're wrong. This isn't pointless. Those ships are buying time for civilians to escape. They're protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's not madness. That's humanity. A new voice spoke from the back of the observation deck. She's right. I've been studying human behavior since this war began. They don't fight for territory or resources. They fight for each other. Counselor Vex stepped forward. He was a Korath, a species known for their neutrality and logic. They never took sides in galactic conflicts. But Vex had been watching humans for months, fascinated by their strange behavior. Look at this battle. Every time a human ship is damaged, other ships move to protect it, even though it puts them at greater risk. They sacrifice tactical advantage to save their comrades. On the screen, the cruiser Silver Dawn detonated its reactor. The explosion destroyed 4 Velthric warships. The observation deck fell silent. Someone had just sacrificed themselves and their entire crew to protect the other human ships. This is what makes them dangerous, Vex continued. Not their weapons or their tactics, but their loyalty. A species that fights like this, that refuses to abandon each other even in the face of certain death, will inspire others, will make allies, will change the balance of power. The Korathi ambassador shook his head. They're still going to lose. Look at the numbers. They're down to 15 ships, are they? Vex pointed to his personal data pad. 3 hours ago, the Velthric fleet had 300 ships. Now they have 253. The humans started with 78 ships. 23 chose to make this stand. They've destroyed 47 enemy vessels at the cost of 8 of their own. That's a kill ratio of nearly 6-1, against a superior force, while outnumbered 10-1. Numbers began appearing on screens around the observation deck. Other species were doing the same calculations. Seeing the same pattern, the Velthric had claimed humans were weak. The battle proved otherwise. I'm sending a message to my government, Vex said. The Korath Confederacy should ally with humanity immediately. A species that fights like this deserves our support. In the Terran system, Lieutenant Kyung pushed her fighter into a tight turn, avoiding enemy fire. Her squadron had been flying combat patrol for 4 hours. They were exhausted, low on fuel and ammunition, but they kept fighting. Dragon 3, you've got 2 bogeys on your tail, her wingman called. Kyung checked her sensors. 2 Velthric fighters pursuing one of her squadron members. She banked hard and accelerated. Her targeting computer locked on. She fired. One enemy fighter exploded. The other broke off, trying to evade. Kyung followed, her fingers steady on the controls. Another missile away. Another kill. That made 17. 17 enemy fighters destroyed. She should feel proud. Instead, she just felt tired. And sad. So many friends lost today. So many good pilots who would never come home. All fighters, this is Defiant Dawn. Multiple jump signatures detected at system edge. Reinforcements incoming. Kyung's exhaustion vanished. She checked her long-range sensors. Hundreds of ships emerging from jump space. The cavalry had arrived. About time, she whispered. Come on, people. Let's finish this. War Master Krell stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human reinforcement fleet was massive. Over 200 ships. But that wasn't what shocked him. Behind the human warships were vessels from other species. Korath destroyers, Miralyn cruisers, Draxan battleships. Even the isolationist Lumari had sent ships, 7 different species. All coming to aid humanity. All willing to fight the Velthric Empire. How? How had humans who had been in space for less than a century managed to gain so many allies? The Velthric had spent thousands of years building their empire through conquest and intimidation. Yet these primitive humans had done in hours what the Velthric could never achieve. They had inspired others to stand with them. War Master, we should withdraw, his tactical officer said. We're now outnumbered 2-1. Krell wanted to agree, but his orders were clear. The Empire could not show weakness, could not retreat. All ships defensive formation. Prepare for... His communication system crackled. A new voice spoke, one with authority. Velthric vessels. This is Admiral Hyon of the Human Coalition Fleet. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now and you will be treated with honor. Continue fighting and we will destroy you. You have 1 minute to decide. Krell looked at his fleet. At the damaged ships. At the exhausted crews. At the odds that had turned completely against him. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something close to fear. Not fear of death, fear of making the wrong choice. War Master, incoming transmission from the Defiant Dawn, his communication officer said. Krell accepted it. Captain Deho's face appeared on his screen. The human looked terrible, blood on his face, uniform torn, burns on his hands. But his eyes were clear and hard. War Master Krell, I know your superiors ordered you to fight to the last ship, but you don't strike me as a fool. You've lost today, not because you're weak, but because you underestimated us. Don't compound that mistake by throwing away more lives. Surrender. Live to fight another day. There was something in the human's voice, not triumph, not hatred, just tired honesty. The voice of one warrior to another. Krell made his decision. All Veltric ships cease fire. We withdraw. Warmaster, I said we withdraw, Krell snapped. Inform the Empire that the humans have gained allies. Many allies. This changes everything. The Veltric fleet began jumping out of the system. Within minutes they were gone. The Battle of Terran Gate was over. On the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, the crew sat in stunned silence. They had survived. Against all odds, despite every calculation, they were still alive. Hana started laughing, then crying, then laughing again. Around the bridge, others joined in. The tension of the past 4 hours breaking like a dam. Deho slumped in his command chair. Every part of his body hurt. He was so tired he could barely think. But they had won. The civilians were safe. The system held. And they had made the Veltric Empire retreat for the first time in its history. Captain? Incoming transmission from Admiral Hyan, Hana said, wiping tears from her eyes. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen. She was smiling, but there were tears on her cheeks too. Captain Deho, I'm ordering your ship to dock with the medical frigate Mercy. Your crew needs rest and treatment. You've done enough, Deho wanted to argue, wanted to say he could keep fighting, but he couldn't even stand up. Acknowledged, Admiral, and thank you for the timing. Thank your crew, Captain. What you did here today, what all of you did, inspired the galaxy. 7 species sent ships because they watched you refuse to retreat. They saw humans willing to die for each other, and decided that was the kind of ally they wanted. You didn't just win a battle today, you changed everything. Down in the Marine Bay, Sergeant June counted his remaining soldiers. He started with 43 Marines. Now he had 19. Private Tae Yang sat against a wall, his rifle across his lap, staring at nothing. The kid had survived his first battle. June wondered if that was a blessing or a curse. Hey, kid, June said gently. You did good today. You held the line. Taeyang looked up at him with haunted eyes. Hyun died. Right next to me. She just fell. I know. A lot of good people died today. But a lot more people lived because of what we did. The civilians got away. That has to mean something. Across the human formation, similar scenes played out. Crews mourning their dead, celebrating their survival, trying to process what they had just experienced. They had faced impossible odds and somehow lived. They had refused to retreat and won respect from the entire galaxy. Ambassador Soo-hyun watched the diplomatic channels light up. Requests for meetings, offers of alliance. Species that had been neutral now wanted to talk. The Korath Confederacy formally requested a mutual defense treaty. The Draxan Empire sent a message saying humans had earned the right to stand among warriors. In one battle, humanity's position in the galaxy had completely changed. They were no longer primitives or prey. They were potential leaders of a new coalition. And it had all started because one captain refused to retreat. The first volley of Veltric missiles struck the human defensive line like a hammer. 3 frigates exploded instantly, their shields overwhelmed by the sheer amount of firepower. The Defiant Dawn shook as plasma bolts hammered against its hull. Warning sirens filled every deck. Shields at 60%, Hana called out, her fingers flying across her console. Enemy formation spreading to surround us. Captain Deho gripped his chair as another explosion rocked the ship. All ships tight formation. Concentrate fire on their lead vessels. Make them pay for every ship they lose. The human ships moved closer together, their shields overlapping to create a stronger defensive barrier. It was a desperate tactic. It meant they had less room to maneuver, but it also meant they could focus their weapons on single targets. The cruiser Morning Star fired all its missiles at once. 30 warheads streaked toward a Veltric battleship. The enemy vessel's point defense systems destroyed most of them, but 6 got through. Explosions blossomed across the battleship's hull. It began to list, atmosphere venting from multiple breaches. Warmaster Krell watched from his command ship. One of his battleships was crippled by inferior vessels, by ships that should have been easy prey. All forward groups maximum firepower. I want those human ships destroyed. Now. The Veltric fleet intensified its assault. 50 ships concentrated their fire on the human formation. The destroyer Iron Wind took a direct hit to its engine section. The ship broke in half, both sections tumbling through space. Escape pods launched desperately from the dying vessel. Most made it. Some didn't. On the defiant dawn, Dr. Minji worked frantically in the medical bay. The wounded kept coming. Burned crew members. People with broken bones from being thrown against bulkheads. A young ensign who couldn't stop screaming. "I need more hands," she shouted to her medical team. "Get everyone who knows first aid down here." 3 decks above, Sergeant June led his Marines toward hull breach on Deck 7. "Seal those doors," he ordered. "Don't let the atmosphere escape into the rest of the ship." Private Tae Yang helped pull the emergency bulkhead closed. Through the small window, he could see the breach. A jagged hole 3 meters wide, stars visible beyond it, and something moving in the darkness. "Sergeant, I see movement." June pushed Tae Yang aside and looked through the window. His expression darkened. "Velthric boarding pods. They're sending troops. Everyone weapons ready. They're coming through that breach." The first Velthric soldier emerged from the hole. It was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in armored scales. It carried a weapon that crackled with energy. June opened fire immediately. His bullets sparked off the alien's armor. The creature roared and charged. Tae Yang fired his rifle on full automatic. Other Marines joined in. The corridor filled with gunfire and the smell of cordite. The Velthric soldier fell, but 2 more emerged behind it. Then 5 more. Then 10. "Fall back to the next bulkhead," June ordered. Controlled retreat. "Cover each other." The Marines backed down the corridor, firing constantly. Tae Yang's rifle clicked empty. He ejected the magazine with shaking hands and slammed in a new one. Beside him, a Marine named Yun took an energy blast to the chest. She fell without a sound. Tae Yang wanted to help her, wanted to drag her back to safety, but there was no time. The Velthric kept coming. They reached the next bulkhead. June pulled a grenade from his belt. "Everyone through, now." When the last Marine crossed the threshold, June threw the grenade and dove through the door. The Marine sealed it just as the explosion went off. The blast was muffled by the thick door, but the entire corridor shook. "Will that hold them?" Tae Yang asked, breathing hard. June checked his rifle. "For a few minutes. Then they'll cut through. We need to set up defensive positions." Across the human formation, similar fights were happening. Velthric boarding parties had breached 5 ships. The humans fought them in corridors and cargo bays, in engineering sections and crew quarters. It was brutal close-quarters combat. The Velthric were bigger and stronger. But the humans were fighting for their ship, for their home. They gave no ground willingly. On the bridge, Hana suddenly shouted a warning. "Captain, 3 Velthric cruisers breaking formation." "They're on a ramming course." Daeho saw it immediately. 3 enemy ships had stopped firing and were accelerating directly toward the Defiant Dawn. They were going to crash into them. It was a suicide attack. Evasive maneuvers. All power to engines. The Defiant Dawn turned hard to port, thrusters burning at maximum. But it wasn't fast enough. One of the Velthric cruisers clipped their starboard side. The impact was devastating. Half the bridge crew were thrown from their stations. Consoles exploded. The lights went out, replaced by dim emergency lighting. Daeho pulled himself back into his chair. His head was bleeding. "Damage report. Starboard weapons offline. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 8. Life support failing in multiple sections." Hana's voice was strained. "Captain, we can't take much more of this." Through the viewport, Daeho watched the human fleet fight and die. The frigate Last Hope rammed a Velthric battleship at full speed, destroying both vessels. The cruiser Silver Dawn detonated its reactor, taking 4 enemy ships with it in the explosion. Every human ship that fell took multiple Velthric vessels with them. "How long until the civilian transports are clear?" Daeho asked. Hana checked her console. 3 hours, 40 minutes, 3 hours and 40 minutes. Daeho looked at his battered crew, at the damage report scrolling across the screens, at the tactical display showing only 15 human ships still fighting. They would never last 3 more hours, but they would try. "All ships, this is Daeho. I know you're hurt. I know you're tired. But those civilians are still evacuating. They need more time. So we give them more time. We hold this line." War Master Krell requested permission to withdraw and reorganize. His fleet had destroyed 8 human ships, but he had lost 47 vessels in return. Nearly 50 ships destroyed by a handful of primitive humans. It was unacceptable. It was impossible. But it was happening. His superiors denied his request. The Velthric Empire could not show weakness, could not retreat from humans. He was ordered to finish the battle, whatever the cost. Krell looked at the tactical display with something close to respect. These humans were not primitives. They were warriors. Foolish warriors, perhaps. Doomed warriors, but warriors nonetheless. All ships continue the attack, but show these humans the honor they have earned. When we destroy them, it will be a clean death. The battle raged on. The humans fought with desperation and creativity. When their weapons failed, they rammed. When their ships were crippled, they self-destructed near enemy vessels. They refused to yield even 1 meter without making the Velthric pay. Dr. Minji performed surgery in a corridor because the medical bay was destroyed. Her hands were covered in blood. She had lost count of how many people she had tried to save, how many had died despite her efforts. But she kept working, kept fighting to save lives even as the ship fell apart around her. Private Tai Yang fired his last magazine at the Velthric soldiers cutting through the bulkhead. When his rifle clicked empty, he drew his knife. Beside him, Sergeant June did the same. They would fight until the end. And then, as the clock showed 3 hours and 57 minutes since the battle began, the sensors detected something new. Hundreds of new signatures at the edge of the system. Jump points opening, ships emerging. It was the human reinforcement fleet, and they had brought friends. The alarm screamed through every corridor of the defiant dawn. Captain Deho stood on the bridge watching the tactical display with cold eyes. 300 red dots filled the screen. 300 Velthric warships had just entered the Terran system. Against them stood 78 human vessels. The math was simple. The math was brutal. "Captain, High Command is transmitting," Lieutenant Hana said from her station. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly over the controls. She was 24 years old. This was her first real war. Deho pressed the communication button. Admiral Yuna's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired. She looked old. "All ships, this is High Command. You are ordered to retreat immediately. Civilian transports need 4 hours to evacuate. You will provide cover during their escape, then withdraw to the Sol system. This is not a request. This is a direct order." Around the bridge, the crew exchanged glances. They all knew what retreat meant. It meant abandoning Terran. It meant falling back to Earth itself. It meant they were losing. "Acknowledged, Admiral," Deho said. He closed the channel and stood silent for a long moment. The bridge crew waited. They knew their captain. They knew that look on his face. "Lieutenant Hana, plot a course to the primary jump gate," Deho said quietly. "Sir?" Hana looked confused. The jump gate was where the Velthric fleet would enter the inner system. It was the last place they should go. "You heard me. Take us to the gate." "Captain, that's the opposite direction from the retreat vector," the helmsman said. Deho turned to face his crew. Every eye was on him. "I'm not retreating," he said. The words fell like stones into still water. "Those civilian transports need time. Someone has to buy them that time. Someone has to hold that gate." "Sir, 1 ship against 300. Hana started. "I know the math, Lieutenant." Deho's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not ordering any of you to stay. This is my choice. Anyone who wants to leave can take the escape pods right now. I won't think less of you. But I'm staying. The Defiant Dawn is staying." The bridge was silent. Then the helmsman spoke. "Setting course for the jump gate." "Captain." "Weapon systems online," the tactical officer said. "I'll reroute all available power to shields and weapons," the engineer added. Hana smiled, tears in her eyes. "Navigation locked." "We're ready, sir." Deho felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Then let's go make history." Down in the Marine Bay, Private Tai Yang checked his rifle for the 3rd time. He was 19 years old. He had finished training 6 months ago. He had never fired his weapon at a living target. Around him, the other Marines prepared their gear in silence. Sergeant June walked through the bay, checking each soldier. He was a big man with scars on his face and hands.
He had fought in the border wars.
He had seen things that gave him nightmares. "Listen up," he said. "The captain's taking us to the gate. We're making a stand. Anyone got a problem with that?" No one spoke. Tai Yang felt his heart pounding. He was scared. He was terrified. But he was also proud. His hand stopped shaking as he locked his helmet into place. The Defiant Dawn moved toward the jump gate alone. The rest of the human fleet began their retreat vector, shepherding the civilian transports away from danger. On the flagship, Admiral Yuna watched the Defiant Dawn break formation. "Admiral, the Defiant Dawn is not responding to hails," her communication officer said. Yuna knew what Daeho was doing. She had served with him for 10 years. She knew he would do something like this. "Let him go," she said quietly. "May fortune favor him." The Velthric fleet detected the single human ship approaching the gate. War Master Krell studied the tactical display with confusion. One ship moving toward his entire fleet. It made no sense. "Is it a trap?" he asked his officers. "Scans show no other human vessels in range, War Master. It appears to be alone." Krell had conquered 12 species in his long career. He had never seen anything like this. Perhaps their navigation system is damaged. Or perhaps they are fools. Either way, destroy them. 10 Velthric warships moved to intercept the Defiant Dawn. They were each twice its size, with heavier armor and more weapons. The outcome was certain. Then something happened that no one expected. The destroyer Iron Wind suddenly changed course. Instead of following the retreat order, it turned and accelerated toward the jump gate, toward the Defiant Dawn. "This is Captain Suhi of the Iron Wind," a voice crackled over the fleet channel. "I'm not leaving Daeho to fight alone. Who's with me?" The cruiser Morning Star broke formation, then the frigate Last Hope, then 5 more ships. Within minutes, 23 human vessels had refused the retreat order. They formed a defensive line at the jump gate, surrounding the Defiant Dawn. On the flagship, Admiral Yuna stared at the display. Half of her remaining combat vessels had just committed mutiny. She should order them back. She should threaten them with court-martial. Instead, she felt tears on her cheeks. "Escort the civilians to safety," she told her remaining ships. "And may the spirits watch over our brave fools." Aboard the Defiant Dawn, Hana watched the other ships arrive. "Captain, we have 22 more vessels joining formation." Daeho smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew he was about to die but had made peace with it. "Open a channel to all ships, all frequencies." When the channel opened, Daeho spoke clearly. His voice was broadcast not just to the human fleet but to the Velthric as well, to anyone in the system who was listening. "This is Captain Daeho of the Defiant Dawn. To the civilians evacuating the system, we're buying you time. Use it well. To my fellow captains who chose to stay, thank you. It's been an honor. And to the Velthric fleet, you want this gate? Come and take it. But know this, we are humanity. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. Every meter you advance will cost you blood. We will make you pay for this system. We will make you remember us." The Velthric fleet opened fire. The sky filled with weapons fire and explosions. The Battle of Terran Gate had begun, 23 ships against 300. The odds were impossible. The outcome was certain. But the humans refused to run. They stood their ground and fought with everything they had. And in that moment, watching from across the galaxy, other species began to pay attention, because they had never seen anything like this before. They had never seen a species that fought harder when the odds became impossible instead of surrendering. They had never seen soldiers who chose death over abandoning their post. The Velthric had called humans weak and primitive. The Battle of Terran Gate would prove them wrong. The real war was just beginning.